Alright, a very good afternoon, class. And for today, we will be going through the fourth chapter from your text, Flamingo, titled The Rat Trap. Right now, this chapter, The Rat Trap, is a story about a man who has a unique view about life and the world. He is a small time thief and a vagabond, meaning he has no family, no friends, no house. He just roams from countryside to countryside, selling small rat traps which he makes himself out of wires he has scraped together. And yet, he has a very strange idea or notion about the world being a rat trap in itself, and how another human being is able to change that perspective of his and bring out a better person in him is what the story is about. And so, without any further ado, let's just go through the text once, line by line, wherein in between I'll be doing translations for you as well. So, my suggestion would be for you to open your books as well and go through the chapter as and when I am reading and read along. So I start the fourth chapter in your text, Flamingo, the Rat Trap. Once upon a time, there was a man who went around setting small rat traps of wire. He made them himself at odd moments from the material he got by begging in the stores or at the big farms. But even so, the business was not specially profitable, so he had to resort to both begging and petty thievery to keep body and soul together. Even so, his clothes were in rags, his cheeks were sunken, and hunger gleamed in his eyes. No one can imagine how sad and monotonous life can appear to such a vagabond who plods along the road, left to his own meditations. But one day, this man had fallen into a line of thought which really seemed to him entertaining. He had naturally been thinking of his rat traps when suddenly he was struck by the idea that the whole world about him, the whole world with its land and seas, its cities and villages, was nothing but a big rat trap. It had never existed for any other purpose than to set baits for people. It offered riches and joys, shelter and food, heat and clothing, exactly as the rat trap offered cheese and pork. And as soon as anyone let himself be tempted to touch the bait, it closed on him, and it and then everything came to an end. And so we begin the story with a kind of an introduction to the main character in the story, the Rattrap peddler. So he was a man, like I said before in the beginning of the chapter itself, a vagabond. He had nothing to look forward to in life. He was a petty thief, and to make ends meet, he would either steal or sell small rat traps that he made out of wire. And one day, as he was thinking about his rat traps, he got the idea that the whole world is a big rat trap. Just like how small pieces of cheese and meat are placed inside a rat trap to trap the rat, the world offers many temptations in the form of shelter, food, clothing, riches. And as soon as any person is tempted enough by the bait, that person is caught in the world, in the trap of the world. And in that case, the world is a rat trap. The world had, of course, never been very kind to him. so it gave him unwanted joy to think ill of it in this way. It became a cherished pastime of his during many dreary ploddings to think of people he knew who had let themselves be caught in the dangerous snare, and of others who were still circling around the beat. One dark evening, as he was trudging along the road, he caught sight of a little grey cottage by the roadside, and he knocked on the door to ask shelter for the night. Nor was he refused. Instead of the sour faces which ordinarily met him, the owner, who was an old man without wife or child, was happy to get someone to talk to in his loneliness. Immediately he put the porridge pot on the fire and gave him supper. Then he carved off such a big slice from his tobacco roll that it was enough both for the stranger's pipe and his own. Finally, he got out an old pack of cards and played jollies with his guest until bedtime. And so he felt pleasure in thinking about the world in such a way that it is a trap, because the world had never been kind to him. People always gave him hostile look, all right? They were very, let's just say that no one was friendly whenever he approached anyone. And one can't even blame them. He was a vagabond, a very dirty looking, lanky fellow, and obviously first impressions tend to matter the most. And he didn't even get, and he never gave a good first impression. And so one day, as he was walking along the road, it was evening time, and he was looking for shelter. So he saw a small grey cottage by the roadside, and he knocked on the door. And he was expecting that owner of the house to speak to him rudely, maybe not offer him shelter. But then, nor did the owner talk rudely, but instead he welcomed him inside, gave him supper, and he even made a pipe for him out of tobacco. All right, he cut off a big slice of tobacco leaf so that the stranger and the owner of the house could smoke. After that, they even played a game of cards. And why it was so is because that old man did not have anyone to share his life with. He lived alone. He didn't have a child. He didn't have a wife. And so maybe he was just happy to have someone to share the night with. The old man was just as generous with his confidences as with his porridge and tobacco. The guest was informed that at once, that in his days of prosperity, his host had been a crofter at Ramsgate Ironworks and had worked on the land. Now that he was no longer able to do day labor, it was his cow which supported him. Yes, that Bossy was extraordinary. She could give milk for the creamery every day, and last month he had received all of 30 kronor in payment. And so the old man was very generous. Right? He was very generous, not just with his food, not just with his hospitality, not just with his tobacco, but he was also very open about his life. He told the Rattrap peddler that when he was young, he used to work at Ramsgate Iron Works. He used to work in an iron mill. Now that he's old and retired, he has a cow named Betsy. And what a cow it was! It gave milk almost every day. And just last month, he had been paid 30 kronor. All right, now kronor is the name given to Norwegian currency. All right, just like how we say rupee and US is dollar and Japan says yen, the Norwegian people call their currency kronor. All right, and at this current time, one Norwegian dollar or maybe one Norwegian krone is equal to almost 9 Indian rupees, right? So he had approx 270 rupees. And at the time of the iron mill and the Rattrap peddler, maybe it was quite a hefty amount. The stranger must have seemed incredulous, for the old man got up and went to the window, took down a leather pouch which hung on a nail in the very window frame, and picked out three wrinkled 10 kroner notes. These he held up before the eyes of his guest, nodding knowingly, and then stuffed them back into the pouch. The next day both men got up in good season. The crofter was in a hurry to milk his cow, and the other man probably thought he should not stay in bed when the head of the house had gotten up. They left the cottage at the same time. The crofter locked the door and put the key in his pocket. The man with the rat trap said goodbye and thank you, and thereupon each went his own way. And somehow, maybe, the old man thought that the rat peddler did not believe him. He went to the window. There was a small leather bag, and from within the bag he took out three 10 kroner notes. All right, 10 kroner को 3 note निकाले, which equivalent to 30 kroner, wrinkled up notes, and showed it to the rat trap peddler. Thereafter they went to bed. Early morning, the host of the house, that is the old man, he got up to milk the cow, and the rat trap peddler too got up, thinking that he should not be sleeping longer than his host. They both said goodbye to each other. The old man locked the door, and they both walked in different directions. But half an hour later, the rat trap peddler stood again before the door. He did not try to get in, however. He only went up to the window, smashed the pane, stuck in his hand, and got hold of the pouch with the 30 kroner. He took the money and thrust it into his own pocket. Then he hung the leather pouch very carefully back in its place and went away. But half an hour later, our rat trap peddler, our petty thief, he came back to the cottage. He broke the window pane, reached inside, took out the old man's bag, took out the money that was inside, put it into his own pocket, hung the bag where it was hanging, and then left the place. As he walked along with the money in his pocket, he felt quite pleased with his smartness. He realized, of course, that at first he dared not continue on the same public highway, but must turn off the road into the woods. During the first hours, this caused him no difficulty. Later in the day, it became worse, for it was a big and confusing forest, which he had gotten into. He tried to be sure to walk in a definite direction, but the paths twisted back and forth so strangely. He walked and walked without coming to the end of the wood, and finally he realized that he had only been working around the same part of the forest. All at once he recalled his thoughts about the world and the rat trap. Now his own turn had come. He had let himself be fooled by a bait and had been caught. The whole forest, with its trunks and branches, its thickets and fallen logs, closed in upon him like an impenetrable prison from which he could never escape. It was late in December. Darkness was already descending over the forest. This increased the danger and increased also his gloom and despair. Finally, he saw no way out, and he sank down on the ground, tired to death, thinking that his last moment had come. But just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard a sound, a hard, regular thumping. There was no doubt as to what that was. He raised himself. Those are the hammer strokes from an iron mill, he thought. There must be people nearby. He summoned all his strength, got up, and staggered into the direction of the sound. And so, after taking money from the old man, or rather stealing money from the old man, he was very pleased with himself. And he thought that I must not use the public road, for I might get caught. So he entered the forest area to avoid capture, but very soon realized that the forest was quite large and he got lost. He tried walking patiently, but then he got nowhere. Then suddenly he realized his own theory about the world being a rat trap, and he thought that now I myself have been tempted by the bait of 30 kronos, and now I am trapped. And he had given up. Evening had fallen in and he had given up. But then suddenly he heard a regular thumping sound. And all at once he realized, or rather he knew what that sound was. It was the sound of work going on in an iron mill, which means there are people nearby. And so he started walking to the direction of the sound. The Ramsjo Ironworks, which are now closed down, were not so long ago a large plant with smelter, rolling mill, and forge. In the summertime, long lines of heavily loaded barges and scows slid down the canal, which led to a large inland lake. And in the wintertime, the roads near the mill were black from all the coal dust which sifted down from the big charcoal crates. And so he had in fact reached the Ramshaw iron mills, which were now closed down, all right. But before, like not so long back, it was quite a flourishing business. Now it was drastically down, and it was during the winter time, of course. During one of the long dark evenings just before Christmas, the master smith and his helper sat in the dark forge near the furnace waiting for the pig iron. Now, pig iron is raw iron, all right, iron which hasn't been processed yet, which are now been put on the fire to be ready to put on the anvil. An anvil is a piece of large metal piece on which iron is placed and hit upon by hammers to give it shape and definition. Every now and then, one of them got up to stir the glowing mass with a long iron bar, returning in a few moments, dripping with perspiration, though, as was the custom, he wore nothing but a long shirt and a pair of wooden shoes. So we are now shown the inside of the iron mill, all right? And as you may have seen in movies, iron mill, कस्तो ठुलो फर्नेसमा आइरनहरू हालेको हुन्छ अनि जस्तो आइरन रातो हुँदाखेरि निकालेर बिट गरेर सेपहरू गर्छ. So in that same way, that work was going on. People were taking turns to turn the iron over as it was being heated inside a very, very, very large oven. At the time, there were many sounds to be heard in the forge. The big bellows groaned and the burning coal cracked. The fireboy shoveled charcoal into the maw of the furnace with a great deal of clatter. Outside roared the waterfall, and a sharp north wind wept the rain against the brick tiled roof. So a lot of activity was going on inside the mill. Right? People were busy. They were doing their own part. All the jobs that were assigned to different people, they were busy doing that. So a lot of clatter and noises were there. It was probably on account of all this noise that the blacksmith did not notice that a man had opened the gate and entered the forge until he stood close up to the furnace. So यति बेसी हल्ला हुँदै थियो त्यहाँ that the master blacksmith, he didn't even realize that the Rattrap peddler had opened the gate, entered the mill, and was standing near the furnace. Surely it was nothing unusual for poor vagabonds, without any better shelter for the night, to be attracted to the forge by the glow of light which escaped through the sooty panes, and to come in to warm themselves in front of the fire. So it wasn't a very out of the ordinary episode, right? The master, because vagabonds, जसको घर छैन के छैन, they used to come to the animal regularly to seek shelter for the night because there was warmth inside. So it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. So the master blacksmith also didn't react in a startled or a surprised way. The blacksmith glanced only casually and indifferently at the intruder. He looked the way people of this type usually did, with a long beard, dirty, ragged, and with a bunch of rat traps dangling on his chest. He asked permission to stay, and the master blacksmith nodded a haughty consent, without honoring him with a single word. So he looked like any other vagabond. Alright, he was dirty, he was ragged, he had a long beard, and he asked for permission to spend the night. And the master blacksmith just nodded. He did not even say a single word to the rat trapper. He just nodded the head as if giving the signal that, yeah, you can sleep here. The tramp did not say anything either. He had not come here to talk, but only to warm himself up. and sleep. In those days, the Ramshaw iron mill was owned by a very prominent iron master, whose greatest ambition was to ship out good iron to the market. He watched both night and day to see that the work was done as well as possible. And at that very moment, he came into the forge on one of his nightly rounds of inspection. And so, Ramshaw Iron Mill in those days was owned by a very prominent iron master, meaning a very well-known iron master was the owner. And his ambition was that his factory should supply the best quality iron to the market. And for that, he used to come check upon the workers regularly. And on that very day and night, at that very moment when the vagabond, when our Rattrap peddler was sleeping on the floor, the owner of the iron mill showed up. Naturally, the first thing he saw was a tall ragamuffin who had eased his way so close to the furnace that steam rose from his wet rags. The iron master did not follow the example of the blacksmiths, who had hardly deigned to look at the stranger. He walked close up to him, looked him over very carefully, then tore off his slouch hat to get a better view of his face. So naturally, the first thing the owner noticed was an unknown person sleeping on the floor. And while all the other workers had chose to ignore the vagabond, the mill owner was a different person. He went very close to check upon him. He removed the hat so as that he could see the face of the person who was sleeping on the floor of his factory. But of course it is you, Nils Olaf, he said. How do you look? And the iron mill owner acted as if he knew the person. He called out to him, Of course it's you. You are Nils Olaf. How are you? The man with the rat traps had never seen the Iron Master at Ramshaw and did not even know what his name was. But it occurred to him that if the fine gentleman thought that he was an old acquaintance, he might perhaps throw him a couple of kronor. Therefore, he did not want to undeceive him all at once. Yes, God knows things have gone downhill with me, he said. So when the mill owner said, You are Nils Olaf, how are you? The ratter peddler opened his eyes, looked at the iron mill owner, and he knew that he is not Nils Olaf. He knew that he does not even know the iron mill owner. But then he thought of this as an opportunity. He thought that if such a rich man thinks that I am one of his friends, he might give me some money. And so he did not clarify the doubt by saying that no, I am not Nils Olaf. He just acknowledged the fact. He acted as if he was Nils Olaf. God knows things have gone downhill with me, he said. So he acted as if he was Nils Olaf. You should not have resigned from the regiment, said the Iron Master. That was a mistake. If only I had still been in the service at the time, it would never have happened. Well, now of course you will come home with me to go along up to the manor house and be received by the owner like an old regimental comrade. That, however, did not please the tramp. But instead of giving him money, the owner said, You should have never resigned from the regiment. If I had been there, I would have never let you resign. Anyway, it's all okay now. Now I want you to come with me to my house and let me receive you as an old regimental comrade, as a brother in arms. But this was not welcome, welcomed by the Rattrap peddler. He did not want to go with the owner. He just wanted a few kronor. He thought that the owner would give him some money, but then going up to the manor is something different because he knows that he's not Nils Olaf and that he would be caught. And so he said, No, I couldn't think of it, he said, looking quite alarmed. He thought of the 30 kronor to go up to the manor house would be like throwing himself voluntarily into the lion's den. He only wanted a chance to sleep here in the forge and then sneak away as inconspicuously as possible. The ironmaster assumed that he felt embarrassed because of his miserable clothing. So he didn't want to go there because he didn't want to get caught. First of all, he has stolen 30 kroner from someone. Secondly, he would be pretending to be someone else, and a rich man's friend at that, and he might get caught. But the mill owner, he thought that maybe he is ashamed because of his condition, the old clothes and all he is wearing. Maybe he feels shy. Please don't think that I have such a fine home that you cannot show yourself there, he said. Elizabeth is dead, as you may already have heard. Ex- my boys are abroad, and there is no one at home except my oldest daughter and myself. We were just saying that it was too bad we didn't have any company for Christmas. Now come along with me and help us make the Christmas food disappear a little faster. So the old man, the owner, thought that maybe his friend is shy because of his condition, and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't think that I have such a big house that you can't even show up there. Elizabeth is dead," most probably hinting that his wife is dead, all right, as you may have heard, because he still thinks that this Rattrap peddler is Nils Olaf. All my sons are abroad, and it's just me and my eldest daughter. And we were just talking how it's Christmas time and we don't have anyone to share it with. So why don't you just come with us and help us finish the Christmas feast a bit faster? But the stranger said no, and again no, and the ironmaster saw that he must give in. It looks as though Captain Von Stahl preferred to stay with you tonight, John Storm, he said to the master blacksmith, and turned on his heel. But he laughed to himself as he went away, and the blacksmith, who knew him, understood very well that he had not said his last word. And so, after pursuing him time and again, the peddler said no and no and no again, and finally the iron mill owner gave in. He said, "Well, I suppose Captain wants to stay with you, Ironmaster." He turned to one of his workers and then he went away. But as he went away laughing. And the worker, the head worker at the mill, knew that he was not done. The owner was not done and he was going to be back again. It was not more than half an hour before they heard the sound of the carriage wheels outside the forge, and a new guest came in. But this time it was not the ironmaster. He had sent his daughter, apparently hoping that she would have better powers of persuasion than he himself. She entered, followed by a valet, carrying on his arm a big fur coat. She was not at all pretty, but seemed modest and quite shy. In the forge, everything was just as it had been earlier in the evening. The master blacksmith and his apprentice still sat on the bench, and iron and charcoal still glowed in the furnace. The stranger had stretched himself out on the floor and lay with a piece of pig iron under his head, and his hat pulled down over his eyes. As soon as the young girl caught sight of him, she went up and lifted his hat. The man was evidently used to sleeping with one eye open. He jumped up abruptly and seemed to be quite frightened. "My name is Edla Wilmanson," said the young girl. "My father came home and said that you wanted to sleep here in the forge tonight. And then I asked permission to come and bring you home to us. I'm so sorry, Captain, that you are having such a hard time." She looked at him compassionately with her heavy eyes, and then she noticed that the man was afraid. Either he has stolen something or he has escaped from jail, she thought, and added quickly, "You may be sure, Captain, that you will be allowed to leave us just as freely as you came. Only please stay with us over Christmas Eve." She said this in such a friendly manner that the rat trap peddler must have felt confidence in her. "It would never have occurred to me that you would bother with me yourself, miss," he said. "I will come at once." He accepted the fur coat which the valet handed him with a deep bow, threw it over the rags, and followed the young lady out to the carriage, without granting the astonished blacksmith so much as a glance. But while he was riding up to the manor house, he had evil forebodings. Why the devil did I take the fellow's money? He thought. Now I am sitting in this trap and will never get out of it. The next day was Christmas Eve, and when the ironmaster came into the dining room for breakfast, he probably thought with satisfaction of his old regimental comrade, whom he had run across so unexpectedly. And so, half an hour after the iron mill owner left, he sent in his daughter, thinking that a woman will have better power of persuasion over a man than himself. So she came in, very plain looking, not beautiful at all, and she entered with a valet. Right, a valet is an assistant who was carrying a big fur coat. She saw the man was sleeping there. She went up, pulled his hat, and he was startled. Right, he jumped up. And then the girl introduced herself. She said that I am Edla Wilmanson, and you are not supposed to sleep here tonight. You are supposed to be our guest, and I have come to get you. She spoke with compassion, all right, but then she noticed one thing. He was actually afraid, and she was a better judge of character than her father. She immediately thought either he has stolen something or he has escaped from jail. So, to make him feel better, she said, I assure you that you will be our guest for tonight, and tomorrow you can leave as freely as you have come tonight. No one will stop you. And so the rat trap peddler somehow felt confidence in her. He wanted to believe her, and he said, since you have taken the trouble for sir to invite me personally to your house, I will accept your invitation. He takes the fur coat from the valet and goes to the carriage to go to the manor house to spend the night there. But then, as he was traveling in the carriage towards the manor, he started cursing himself. Why did I even steal that old man's money? Now I'm caught deeper into the rat trap of the world. And so early next morning, it was Christmas Eve, and the mill owner was very happy that he had his old regimental comrade with him to share his Christmas with. And he was talking with his daughter. First of all, we must see to it that he gets a little flesh on his bones, he said to his daughter, who was busy at the table. And then we must see that he gets something else to do than run around the country selling rat traps. So he's very hopeful about the friend. He said, first, we need to put some meat onto his body. He's very thin. We have to feed him. We have to make him a bit healthy. Then I will see to it that he has something to do other than selling rat traps. But the daughter was still doubtful, and she said, it is queer that things have gone downhill with him as badly as that, said the daughter. Last night, I did not think there was anything about him to show that he had once been an educated man. So the daughter had her doubts, all right? She said, last night, when I had a conversation with him, I I felt that he did not speak like an educated man at all, right? It didn't feel like I was talking to a captain of a regiment. And the father said, you must have patience, my little girl. As soon as he gets clean and dressed up, you will see something different. Last night he was naturally embarrassed. The tramp's manners will fall away from him with the tramp clothes. The father still believes that he is his friend. He says, don't worry, little girl. It's just that he was looking so dirty last night that he had no confidence in himself. You will see, once he gets cleaned off and wears clean clothes, then you will see the true captain that he is. My friend, Nils Olaf. Just as he said this, the door opened and the stranger entered. Yes, now he was truly clean and well dressed. The valet had bathed him, cut his hair, and shaved him. Moreover, he was dressed in a good-looking suit of clothes which belonged to the ironmaster. He wore a white shirt and a starched collar and whole shoes. But although his guest was now so well groomed, the ironmaster did not seem pleased. He looked at him with puckered brow, and it was easy to understand that when he had seen the strange fellow in the uncertain reflection from the furnace, he might have made a mistake. But that now, when he stood there in broad daylight, it was impossible to mistake him for an old acquaintance. What does this mean? He thundered. The stranger made no attempt to dissimulate. He saw at once that the splendor had come to an end. "It is not my fault, sir," he said. "I never pretended to be anything but a poor trader, and I pleaded and begged to be allowed to stay at the forge. But no harm has been done. At worst, I can put on my rags again and go away." "Well," said the ironmaster, hesitating a little, "it was not quite honest either. You must admit that, and I should not be surprised if the sheriff would like to have something to say in the matter." The tramp took a step forward and struck the table with his fist. "Now I am going to tell you, Mr. Ironmaster, how things are," he said. "This whole world is nothing but a big rat trap. All the good things that are offered to you are nothing but cheese rinds and bits of pork, set out to drag a poor fellow into trouble. And if the sheriff comes now and locks me up for this, then you, Mr. Ironmaster, must remember that a day may come when you yourself may want to get a big piece of pork, and then you will get caught in the trap." The ironmaster began to laugh. "That was not so badly said, my good fellow. Perhaps we should let the sheriff alone on Christmas Eve. But now, get out of here as fast as you can." So as he was saying those lines to the daughter, the Rattrap peddler entered the room, and this time he was clean, he was bathed, his hair was cut, his beard was shaved. He was wearing a clean set of clothes. And as he entered, now the iron mill owner realized his mistake. That it was due to certain darkness and lighting conditions in the furnace that he thought that the Rattrap peddler was Nils Olaf. Well, actually, he was another fellow. And and so now the iron mill owner realizes his mistake. And even Nils Olaf now knows that his game is up. And so he says, "But I never said I was your friend. You are the one who forced me to come here. I just wanted to spend the night at the furnace." And then the iron mill owner said, "But you weren't very honest on your part as well. You never said that you weren't Nils Olaf." And then the Rattrap peddler said, "Well, still no harm has been done. Let me just get my clothes and be on my way." But the iron mill owner was not done. He said, "No, you have deceived me, and I will bring this matter in front of the sheriff." But when the word sheriff was mentioned, the rat trap peddler lost his cool. He became more angry, and he struck the table with his fist, and he said, "Look here, Mr. Ironmaster. You have trapped me into the rat trap of the world by offering me temptations. But you will soon realize that one day even you will be tempted by bigger things, and at that time you will be caught in the rat trap of the world." And when the iron mill owner heard about his theory about the world being rat trap and all, he was very amused, and he said, "Well, let's just leave the sheriff alone. It's Christmas Eve. I won't make any complaints, but you need to leave my house immediately." But then the daughter, she intervened, and she said, but just as the man was opening the door, the daughter said, "I ought to stay. I think he ought to stay with us today. I don't want him to go." And with that, she went and closed the door. "What in the world are you doing?" said the father. The daughter stood there quite embarrassed and hardly knew what to answer. The morning she had felt so happy when she thought how homelike and Christmassy she was going to make things for the poor hungry wretched. She could not get away from the idea all at once, and that was why she had interceded for the vagabond. "I am thinking of the stranger here," said the young girl. "He walks and walks the whole year long, and there is probably not a single place in the whole country where he is welcome and can feel at home. Wherever he turns, he is chased away. Always he is afraid of being arrested and cross-examined. I should like to have him enjoy a day of peace with us here, just one in the whole year." The ironmaster mumbled something in his beard. He could not bring himself to oppose her. "It was all a mistake, of course," she continued. "But anyway, I don't think we ought to chase away a human being whom we have asked to come here and to whom we have promised Christmas cheer." "You do preach worse than a parson," said the ironmaster. "I only hope you won't have to regret this." The young girl took the stranger by the hand and led him up to the table. "Now sit down and eat," she said, for she could see that her father had given in. The man with the rat traps said not a word. He only sat down and helped himself to the food. Time after time he looked at the young girl who had interceded for him. Why had she done it? What could the crazy idea be? After that, Christmas Eve at Ramsho's passed just as it always had. The stranger did not cause any trouble because he did nothing but sleep. The whole afternoon he lay on the sofa in one of the guest rooms and slept at one stretch. At noon they woke him up so that he could have his share of the good Christmas fare. But after that he slept again. It seemed as though for many years he had not been able to sleep as quietly and safely as here at Ramshow. In the evening, when the Christmas tree was lighted, they woke him up again, and he stood for a while in the drawing room, blinking as though the candlelight hurt him. But after that he disappeared again. 2 hours later he was aroused once more. He then had to go down into the dining room and eat the Christmas fish and porridge. So even though it was a case of mistaken identity and the father wanted the man to leave, the daughter interceded and she said that no, he will not leave. He will enjoy his Christmas fare here, that we had invited him as a guest, and he should be allowed to enjoy Christmas. And the father was unable to do anything against his daughter's wishes, so he just conceded. And then so began Christmas Eve at mill owner's manor, where the Rattrap peddler spent a quiet evening, and he did not even bother anyone. He just slept and slept. They woke him up for food, then he slept again. Then they woke him up again, then he slept again. Then they woke him up again, and they slept again. So that was what was going on during Christmas Eve. And the final dinner he enjoyed with the family. As soon as they got up from the table, he went around to each one present and said thank you and good night. But when he came to the young girl, she gave him to understand that it was her father's intention that the suit which he wore was to be a Christmas present. He did not have to return it, and if he wanted to spend the next Christmas Eve in a place where he could rest in peace and be sure that no evil would befall him, he would be welcome back again. The man with the rat traps did not answer anything to this. He only stared at the young girl in boundless amazement. The next morning the ironmaster and his daughter got up in good season to go to the early Christmas service. The guest was still asleep, and they did not disturb him. So the final Christmas dinner got over. The rat trap peddler thanked everybody present there. And when he reached the young girl, she said that the clothes which he was wearing, the clothes, the clean clothes, he is to keep those clothes as a Christmas gift. And if again during the next Christmas he feels like he needs a place to spend the night where he will feel safe, he is most welcome to come there. And he could not understand such kindness being bestowed to him. So he just remained silent. Next morning, the mill owner and his daughter went for Christmas service to the church while the rat trap peddler was still asleep. When about 10 o'clock they drove back from the church, the young girl sat and hung her head even more dejectedly than usual. At church, she had learned that one of the old crofter of the ironworks had been robbed by a man who went around selling rat traps. Yes, that was a fine fellow you let into the house, said her father. I only wonder how many silver spoons are left in the cupboard by this time. So when they were at church, they learned that the rat trap peddler was a thief, that he had stolen from old retired crofter from iron mill where he had stolen 30 kronor. So now as they were coming back, the mill owner was angry at his daughter. Yes, see what you have done. You have invited a thief to our house. Now only now God knows how many silver spoons are left in the house. The wagon had hardly stopped at the front steps when the ironmaster asked the valet whether the stranger was still there. He added that he had heard at church that the man was a thief. The valet answered that the fellow had gone, and he had not taken anything with him at all. On the contrary, he had left behind a small little package which Miss Wilkinson was to be kind enough to accept as a Christmas gift. So when they reached home, the father called the assistant and he asked if the guest was still there because they had learned at church that he was a thief and that a lot could have been stolen from the house. But quite opposite to that, the assistant told the iron mill owner that not only had the rat trap peddler not taken anything with him, in fact, he had left a small gift for his daughter. The young girl opened the package, which was so badly done up that the contents came into view at once. She gave a little cry of joy. She found a small rat trap, and in it lay three wrinkled 10 kronor notes. But that was not all. In the rat trap lay also a letter written in large, jagged characters. So, the rat trap peddler had not stolen anything from the manor, instead, he had left a gift. When the young lady opened the gift, she saw that it was a small rat trap, and inside it was the three 10 kronor notes that he had stolen from the old crofter. And within it was a letter as well. And the letter reads, Honored and noble miss, since you have been so nice to me all day long, as if I was a captain, I want to be nice to you. In return, as if I was a real captain, for I do not want you to be embarrassed at this Christmas season by a thief. But you can give back the money to the old man on the roadside, who has the money pouch hanging on the window frame as a bait for poor wanderers. The rat trap is a Christmas present from a rat who would have been caught in the world's rat trap if he had not been raised captain, because in that way he got the power to clear himself. Written with friendship and high regard, Captain von Stahl. And so, in the letter it was written that, Dear Miss, I am very thankful to you for you have been so nice to me, right? I am returning this money to you and I will talk to you as a captain because you have treated me as a captain and not as a common thief that I am. Please return this money to the old man, which he hangs around in his purse near the window as a trap. I was a common thief, but you have treated me as a captain, and when I became a captain, I was able to clear my name. All right, you have given my life a new direction. I thank you for your kindness. And he even signs the letter as Captain von Stahl. And so, with this, we come to the end of the fourth chapter, that is titled The Rat Trap, wherein we see the transformation of a common thief mending his ways just because someone had showed him a little kindness. So, with this, we come to the end of the chapter. Please go through the chapter once, underline the difficult words, and find the meaning as well. Until the next time, take care.